The Ascent is an action shooter RPG set in a cyberpunk world that you can play through solo or with up to 4 friends in online or local co-op. The game is developed by Neon Giant, a team of 12 developers based in Sweden. The Ascent is their first game and they put forth a tremendous amount of effort, and it definitely shows. First, let's talk about the technical specifications for this game, and while I only played the game on the Xbox Series X, this list of technical specs shows its performance capabilities on PC as well as the Xbox Series S, Xbox One, and Xbox One X. The game runs at a fairly smooth 60 FPS in 4K on Xbox Series X, and even in online co-op, the combat is very smooth and feels good. Particle effects with moves like the hydraulic smash are very impressive, and there were several moments in the game that genuinely impressed me, especially considering that this game was developed by an indie studio. So a quick no spoiler summary of the story within the game. You're an indentured servant, aka indent. You're really more of a hired gun or mercenary that has just arrived on VELES, a self-sustained arcology filled with all sorts of villainy and scum. It isn't long before the corporation that owns and runs VELES goes dark and the tenuous order of the arcology falls into chaos. It's up to you to ascend to the top of the megastructure and find out what has happened using nothing but your weapons, tactical gear, augments, and cyberdeck to carry out the task. And the game gives you the option to do that with up to 3 additional friends in online or local co-op. The devs state that the game runs about 12 to 15 hours, and I've managed to get around 12 hours out of it so far, and I've still not completed it. I'll talk a little bit now about the presentation, and by that I mean the visual and audio design, the ambiance and tone of the game, and so on. So first off, the game looks great and initially has a dark and dirty atmosphere with appropriately named locations such as the Deep Stink. However, as you ascend through the tiers, the areas become less dirty, with the pinnacle tier being a glossy white, red, and gold aesthetic with beautiful balcony vistas to overlook the shining metropolis. The player UI is compact and gives you all the information you need while also not taking up an excessive amount of screen space. It's also condensed to one spot at the bottom right, so players only have to look to one corner of the screen for all relevant info in the heat of battle. Now I want to talk about the sound design. So not all characters are voiced, but most of the important characters are fully voiced in English by some talented individuals. The game also has subtitles and written dialogue in 10 different languages, which I'll show here. The music and bustling sounds coming from the city are all well done. Music is generally subtle and meshes into the background. You don't feel as if you're listening to the same exact melody or track every time you enter or exit combat, which is good. Weapons and abilities all sound great and unique, and the death wails of enemies are over the top and add to the chaotic feeling of combat. There is the occasional temporary audio bug, but those aside, the sound design is great. Moving on to some gameplay aspect, the game is mostly played in third person, top down, but the angle of the camera will often change depending on where you are. In some cases, this causes the game to take on a side-scroller viewpoint and feel. Moving on to RPG elements and systems in the game, first the character creator is decent enough and allows you to make a unique looking character, and you can always alter your appearance for free at the grafter vendor at any point in the game. There are 8 skills in total. These skills are more so stat boosters for specific aspects of your character, such as crit chance, accuracy, health, and so on. Each point you invest into a skill will also raise the associated attribute by 1 point. The 4 attributes are cybernetics, motorics, biometrics, and frame. Each skill is color-coded for its associated attribute, and it's also stated which attribute a given skill is associated with at the bottom of the skill description. For example, points invested into either the tactical sense skill or critical hit rate skill will also count as points into the green cybernetics attribute. I haven't spoken about augments yet, but each augment is associated with a specific attribute, and the more points you have in that attribute, the more effective you'll be with that augment. This means that while the skills themselves are more stat boosters, they will also be important to your playstyle in terms of which augments you use, which will provide much of the variety to the gameplay experience as you progress through the game. Moving on to the loadout is where you have weapons and tactical equipment. Weapons are a big part of the game, and there are a good amount of them to find as you progress through the main missions. I've completed most of the game at this point and have seen about 25 unique weapons so far. Each weapon can be upgraded at the gunsmith in exchange for components which range from basic to advanced. As you level it up, it will do more damage, so save those components until you find a weapon that really suits your needs. I personally like the physical damage minigun the most. That brings me to damage types. There are 4 damage types: physical, fire, electric, and I think the last one is hollow, but I'm not entirely sure. Enemies will have resistances and vulnerabilities to different types of damage. If your damage numbers are red, that means your damage type is highly efficient against that enemy. White numbers means normal damage, and gray numbers means your weapon's damage type is inefficient against the enemy. You can mix and match your equipped pair of weapons to maximize your flexibility in combat against different enemy types. You also have a tactical equipment that's charged by dealing damage to enemies. These vary from grenades to healing fields to a portable mech that can be summoned for extra damage and protection. They add a nice bit of variety to your playstyle and can be extremely useful. Unlike the weapons, armor can't be upgraded at a vendor. Instead, you'll need to find and equip new armor as you level up to meet the demands of more challenging enemies. In addition to resistances to the various damage types, armor will also offer a large variety of attribute and stat boosters, so check the details to see what each is and choose the armor that fits your playstyle best. Another way to determine the relative power of different weapons and armor is to see what color their name is. In order from weakest to strongest, the color system goes peach, bronze, silver, gold, and purple or epic. Moving on to the augments, these are one of the best parts of the game in my opinion, and I've already explained how they work in relation to attributes, but now I'll give some concrete examples. Most of the augments I've seen depended on cybernetics, motorics, and frame attributes. A lot of the cybernetics dealt with summoning minions to fight for you, but I recently got a cybernetics augment that allows you to steal health from enemies, and another one causes defeated enemies to explode upon death. Then there were also some really strong motorics augments, such as an auto lock-on ability or an arm-mounted laser beam, along with a homing missile volley to devastate enemies. Personally, I was using a lot of frame-based augments. One of my favorites let me summon a bubble shield that slowed down enemy projectiles, sort of like bullet time. There was also an augment that summoned a set of blade drones that sliced up nearby enemies, and the most recent frame augment I got allows me to knock up enemies into the air and puts them in a stasis field, leaving them extra vulnerable to gunfire. Altogether, these abilities add a lot of depth to combat and make it very enjoyable. There are also modules which give you passive bonuses such as improved health regen or a better version of dodge. On top of this, you can crouch and aim your gun high to shoot over cover, and sometimes you'll need to aim high while standing to hit flying drones, providing specific enemy types with support. Add that in with the dodge ability and you've got yourself a fairly deep combat system to mess around with and carve out your own unique playstyle. Another thing I want to talk about is the cyber deck, which you'll use to hack your way through yellow doors and chests. Being able to hack a door or chest depends on the ice level requirement. I've found that you usually find the ice upgrades to your cyber deck by completing the main missions. One issue I ran into is that many chests I would find required ice level 2 to open up, but I only had ice level 1. I eventually progressed far enough in the main missions to find the ice level 2 chest upgrade for my cyber deck, only to start finding ice level 3 chests. I suppose this is because they want to give dedicated players a reason to revisit previous areas to go snag the chests they weren't able to open, but personally I'm not the biggest fan of that kind of system. Now I'll speak a bit more on progression as you play through the game. So first, quests and enemies don't scale at all, which I don't necessarily mind. You can run into an area where the enemies are 10 levels above you, and while you might be able to kill them with careful planning, it's usually a sign that you've treaded into an area of the game that you're not yet ready for. Likewise, many side missions that you can accept will be too high level to complete when you accept them, or will require you to traverse to locations you don't yet have access to, and you may need to save them for later. On the other hand, if you neglect to explore certain areas or complete side missions, you may out-level the requirements of that mission or area, and they will no longer provide a significant amount of XP. The game does give you a main mission storyline to follow, but if you don't do enough exploring and completing of optional missions on the side, you may find your level falling behind in terms of what the main missions require. That being said, I'd recommend completing the main missions if they are at or below your current level, as they'll often unlock new items to purchase in the shops, new areas to explore, and new side missions to complete. In short, the game doesn't exactly hold your hand on where to go and what to do, and it will require some navigation and exploration on your end to be successful in the long run, but capable RPG players will be able to find their way through this Cyberpunk arcology easily enough. Now I want to talk about the online co-op mode specifically, which is mainly how I was playing the game, and while I was able to play, I did experience a fair amount of bugs strictly associated with the online co-op mode. I won't give a detailed list of the bugs in this video, but I'll leave one in the description of the video as some people may find it helpful. None of the bugs were game breaking, but they generally ranged from mildly annoying to some that were bad enough to require restarting the online lobby in order to fix. They were also frequent enough to subtract a score point or two from the online co-op experience. I don't say this to discourage Neon Giant from including online co-op in their games, as to me it's one of the most appealing aspects about the game, and it's a feature that is sorely missing from many other amazing indie games. I'm hopeful that they'll put more time and effort into polishing up the online mode so that players can enjoy it without having to dance around the bugs. And again, I only encountered these bugs in the online co-op mode. Almost none of them were present in single player or couch co-op. Luckily, most of these bugs are avoidable. The few remaining bugs can be worked around, are rare, or are only mildly annoying. That all being said, this game also has many amazing co-op features that are often missing in many AAA co-op experiences. For one thing, you and your group all share mission progress. One member of the team will never be left behind on a previous mission step while the others move on. Everyone gains the same amount of experience when bad guys are killed, even if someone didn't contribute to the kill, so nobody ends up being a lower level than the others. Another is that all loot that's found and picked up in the open world is shared to everyone in the squad, so if you find a cool rifle or piece of armor on the ground, everyone in the group gets it. There's no need to fight over loot in this game. You are free to spend your own credits how you wish, and purchased items are not shared across the squad, meaning that there will still be some variation in gear between you and your teammates. Another cool feature is that during cutscenes, it'll show your entire team in the cutscene all walking into a bar or up to a venue, and you're all shown wearing your unique equipment. Another thing is that all abilities and augments are designed to work in co-op and single player. One great example is how they managed to make a bullet time or slow motion based ability that works fantastic in co-op. It's called hyperfocus, and instead of slowing down the entire world to a crawl, it simply creates a domed area around your character where all enemy projectiles are slowed down to where you can easily dodge them. This allows you to have slow motion for yourself and any teammates in your protective bubble without messing with the overall flow of combat for co-op players. It's actually really ingenious. So to sum it up, while it took some effort on our part to avoid triggering bugs, we didn't run into any game-breaking bugs where we were no longer able to progress through the main missions and story, and we still managed to thoroughly enjoy our online co-op experience. Many of the features that are included in this game's co-op mode show that the devs really cared about making a fun co-op RPG game. Most indie games don't offer any sort of co-op, and if they do, it's generally local co-op only. The reason is pretty obvious: it's difficult to pull off online co-op and have it function as well as the single player. Neon Giant should be commended for their efforts on this front, and even though I'm not a game developer, it seems like the bugs that are affecting online co-op are simple enough to patch and fix. Local co-op works just as well as single player and is basically bug-free. The one downside is that only one player can access their journal or speak with a vendor or mission giver at a time, while the other players have to wait due to the screen being shared. You also have to stick pretty close together because of the screen being shared. While in online play, each player is free to do what they want while other players are shopping, as well as being able to spread out in the same loaded area as screens are not being shared. And now I'll just cover some other features that I really enjoyed about this game. and one was the option to sell all duplicate items at vendors for cash with a single button so that you could quickly exchange extra items for credits. Also, a lot of the armor and weapons you find actually look really cool, and I wish that Cyberpunk 2077 had more of this hardcore militaristic style cyberpunk armor and aesthetics available to deck your player out with. Then we have the fast travel systems, which between the free train transits and the fairly low cost taxis, which can be summoned at the press of a button, retreading through previously visited locations is a mostly early game problem that is quickly solved once you unlock the taxi system after completing the third mission. I also really like the codex in your journal, especially the tutorial section, as it has some really useful information on mechanics like dodge or how to summon a taxi and so on. While there is no transmog system, you can still choose the color palette for all the armor you'll find in the character customization menu, meaning that all armors you find and use will at least match in color if nothing else. Another cool feature is that when you equip augmentations and modules, it actually alters the appearance of your character by adding in metal implants that can be seen cosmetically, which is super cool and great attention to detail by the devs. One last thing is that it's on Game Pass for Xbox and I think Microsoft Windows as well, so if you have Game Pass, which you really should if you play on Xbox, definitely download this game and give it a try, unless you're too young for the mature language and violence. Now for the summary and verdict. Overall, I have 2 scores to give this game. First would be for the core game without any of the bugs, which is what you get with single player and couch co-op. At the game's price point, and especially considering it's on Game Pass, that experience easily gets a 9 out of 10 for me. The other score is for the online co-op, which would probably be a 10 out of 10 if it didn't have all the bugs and issues marring the experience. If it worked as well as solo and couch co-op, then online co-op would be the best way to experience this game. Those bugs and issues were bad enough to bring the score down about 2 points to a still solid 8 out of 10. This is a great game and I highly recommend it. Let me know what you think of this game in the comments below. If you want to be notified when I release new videos in the future, consider subscribing. You're helping me feed my cat. Her name's Marshmallow. Have a great day. If you're here today, have a great Thursday. And as always, thanks for watching.